Hey everybody, welcome back to Terminus, the Roomba of extreme metal podcasts. I am the death metal guy, aka that new Anata album is coming any day now.
And I'm the black metal guy, aka Svipdag Bloodthirst, Wolf's Head Warrior of the Iron Woods.
I thought of one while you were puzzling it out, and I just wanted it to be a Kid Rock, son of Heimdall, or something.
That's also pretty good. You know, the descent from Heimdall actually marks the castes of Norse society.
Oh, does it?
There's an Enetic poem about Heimdall fathering with different women, fathering the different castes of men.
And of course, the greatest of them all was Kid Rock. So.
Kid Rock, the sovereign.
Well, you know the what you think are the nonsense words in Bawitaba are actually a secret, even more Elder Futhark.
Yeah. I chant these lines in praise of Rock the Kid, generous giver of bling.
Bawitaba,
caster down of diamonds from his high throne.
Oh man, I'm glad he's still doing well. He's our Kid Rock.
Yeah, Kid Rock is cool. Yeah.
Episode 30. Jesus Christ, man. We gotta stop doing this.
True. Yeah. It's I mean, dang. Yeah, 30. Wow.
Yeah. That's as many years as I am old. I mean, that's ridiculous. We've been doing this for over half a year, so got a pretty interesting show today. We got some weird, cool stuff to talk about. But what have we got for Terminus news, Black Metal Guy? What's going on in the greater Terminus co-prosperity sphere?
Oh, welcome back to Terminus News. Okay, and today we've got two things loosely grouped by their relation to England. We've got something from a project from there and a record label. So the first off is Spider God. A friend of a friend had heard of the show through word of mouth, which is always great, and he hit us up and asked us to review his stuff. So I was very pleasantly surprised when I heard this because it was right up our alley.
Yeah, this is fucking awesome.
Uncannily up our alley.
Yeah. So this is like his first EP called Den Inre Borgen, The Interior Castle, and it's like it's based off like Ingmar Bergman films, I think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we got a track here. We're just gonna sample a little bit for the kids called On Inga Ord or Still No Words. So let's listen to the opening bit of this.
Death metal guy, did you like that riff?
It's like one of the best riffs of the year. Instantly, it's so fucking good. Like it's so well. Obviously, this guy needs to do a split with Axis of Light. That's the most obvious comparison to something we've covered on the show. Although obviously this is very different. I mean, what do you?
Same country makes sense.
There's a little more than that, but I mean, what would you even describe this as? I mean, this is obviously there's a big kind of post-punk thread running through this, but it's fully subsumed into black metal.
Yeah, I think like the post-punk is kind of a structural thing. These are pretty short songs. They're all under 5 minutes, and they've all. Although we opened with a blast, there's a lot of kind of stompy mid-tempo stuff, and
it's got that continuous sort of like axis of light, guitar jangle thing that we've been hearing from a lot of the British guys lately, who seem to be kind of channeling a lot of like 80s UK guitar music, which I find really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. And it's kind of I would group this with that phenomenon of like, there's black metal getting hyper melodic, and then there's music that kind of like goes for it so far it completely passes out of the metal frame of melody.
Yeah, this is definitely not like black metal.
Yeah, you get the kind of you get the Franco-Finnish stuff, you get the French chivalric black metal, you get the Southern European solar sort of solar sound, or this kind of brawny American pentatonic stuff, right? Those are all very melodic, but they've all kind of got a link to traditionally metal senses of melody.
Yeah, this is way out there. Actually, well, this guy needs to get introduced to Damien from Colloquial Sound.
Oh, that's a good point.
That would be a perfect fit for his label, I think.
Yeah.
This sort of esoteric, like, past black metal. Like, actual post-black metal, instead of, like, what that implies nowadays.
Yeah, they should be in touch if they aren't already. But this record, I should say for our fans, too, this is gonna come out on Death Cult Productions.
It is?
Yeah, so Death Cult, Death, KVLT, recently become a big force in UKBM. Mm-hmm. Some of it is that kind of nicely packaged raw tape black that we not that into on this show. But they've also done a lot of good stuff by like Thy Dying Light. And a scene of bands connected to them. So it's kind of a prolific UK underground label that has a little bit of a scene coherent around it. Yeah, so like this guy mentioned Oldowan Gash as a reference point, and he referenced Vehemence, the French chivalric black metal band, and you can kind of hear that.
Those are both things that we love on this show. So.
Yeah, let's throw it out. Let's do one more quick sample of just another sick riff off of this.
Oh, yes. Yeah, this is just so hilariously cool. I love it.
So this is from Vitna till Sunderfall.
Is it?
Oh, you wanted to do the other one. All right, this is a good example of the how going sort of beyond black metal melody. Yeah.
This one is off Vraket's Grove, Shipwreck's Hull. Yeah, right. So let's try this out. I love the absurd simplicity of just basically doing Pachelbel's Canon in D for your opening riff on your raw black metal song.
Yeah, given it's about Bergman, it's probably about something like... That's like a wedding song, right?
Yeah, it's used in Wangs a lot, but I think, because that sounds so familiar, I think his particular arrangement of it might be from something. Like, I swear to God, I think it's possible that it might be, like... from like an anime opening or something that I've heard before, but that specific arrangement of Pachelbel, yeah.
Maybe just black metal in Pachelbel's Canon makes it sound like anime.
That is true, yeah.
But like, either way, right? That's a really good example of sort of passing through black metal melodicism. Grötzug is a band that did that also. Just super kind of, kind of just like a movie soundtrack, early 20th century popular orchestral music kind of vibe. Hard to pin down. Did part of that also sounds kind of like the Soviet national anthem?
Yeah,
the end of that riff. Da, 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 da. Yeah, who knows? And that change up at the end was really good too, right?
Oh yeah, no, actually the whole EP is sick, and unfortunately, just because our schedules are kind of crammed right now, we're not able to do a full review for it. But rest assured, gets our full endorsement, the entire EP.
Yeah, those are representative samples.
Yeah.
Okay, so Spider God, cool. We hope to have a full length soon so we can review it.
Yep.
Next up, so a guy from a UK label called Rat King Records. That's Rat King, two separate words, not Rat King, one word. Sent me, he was like, kind of like somebody trying to sell you drugs. He was like, yo, are you into dungeon synth? I was like, not really, but let's see what you're holding.
Oh man, man, Dungeon Synth fucked up a bunch of my friends, dude. I don't know.
Yeah, some of that shit's cut with meth. But I checked it out, and this is an Icelandic dungeon synth group, and it's actually a group, unlike most dungeon synth. It's two guys. It's called Dyfliza, Dyfliza, Dyfliza. And the album Morkensalmar follows the travels of Ganglater and Ganglud, characters inspired by the two thralls of Hel, that's the goddess, as they tend to the dead in a dark, wintry otherworld.
Sounds
so neat. Yeah, so it's kind of remote from the typical dungeon synth themes, and it's maybe a little more serious, a little less video gamey.
Yeah.
And I not being a huge dungeon synth guy, I don't know that I loved every part of this, but it definitely seems on the better side of dungeon synth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got a whereas a lot of dungeon synth is kind of supposed to be kind of good, like fun or comforting or playing D&D music.
Yeah.
This is pretty different from that. So let's see what you think of it.
Okay, and this is off
Vita Vols at around 1:30.
All right, let's try it. That's definitely comparable to stuff that we've covered on the show before. Like the first thing that struck me was Moldryan.
Oh, like those kind of rich synthy parts off of the last record.
Yeah, the sort of ambient stuff that they were doing. And actually, one thing that really struck me is it reminds me a lot of the ambient stuff that Venterikit does. Who's basically totally forgotten at this point, but I still love Venterikit.
Yeah, what's Venterikit? I remember the name, but
Sort of like really cold, minimal, sort of paysage d'hiver type black metal, plus, synthy ambient stuff. I don't know, it's like he was...
So like very, very before it was cool.
Very before... Oh yeah, no, if he had started 2 years ago, he'd be like one of the biggest people on the planet, but he was doing shit like that back in, the late 90s and early 2000s, so...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, also that sort of thing, that bit that comes in at the end that's a little more kind of uplifting reminds me a lot of Halljaruna. So, that sort of Norwegian-Swedish collab, who are much more of kind of a folk metal band than this, but they have a lot of dungeon synth in it. So this fits in nicely with those kind of old mill bands, I think, resonates with that. And it's an interesting choice for a mostly black metal label to sort of like stake their developing label on this release.
Yeah,
it's kind of daring. It's kind of daring to move that direction. When I talked to him, he said he's also not that into dungeon synth, but there was something about this that caught his ear. So, and I will also say, in terms of a mood being different from dungeon synth, I don't know if it was the music or what, but when I was listening to this, I ended up thinking about like the heat death of the universe and shit. So definitely,
that's just every time I go to sleep. All right, so before we get to our rundown of today's episodes, real quick, if you want ever more Terminus content to fill the yawning chasm in your heart where real human relationships should be, feel free to follow us on social media. You can get me on the Facebook at Terminus Podcast, or you can follow the Black Metal Guy on IG over at Terminus Extreme Metal.
Or you can do both.
Yeah, you can also do both. I mean, I guess that is an option if you want to take part in that sort of thing. But, and then if you really feel the need to develop the parasocial relationship further, you can support us on Patreon or Subscribestar. We've got a bunch of different tiers available, but the clearest ones, if you just want access to our Terminus Prime bonus episodes, you can do that with just $3 a month. And then if you really want to get involved, emotionally and physically with the staff of Terminus, you can join the Terminus Black Circle, our private Discord server, for $5 a month and up, where we have a great time posting weird stuff from Indian Facebook and talking about anime and stuff like that. If those are things that you want to do.
Last two music posts are something from the new Azarath, and we debate, is the new Azarath good, and Impaled Nazarene. So,
always good. Yeah. All right, so we got to do an episode now. So you got the first half this time. What do you got?
Yeah, so I think we got a pretty cohesive aesthetic for this episode, and definitely both halves kind of hang together pretty well. Mm-hmm. Leading off from my end with two things that are sort of in the black metal universe. Sort of black metal in terms of sort of atmosphere and kind of spiritual thrust, but very influenced by heavy metal and thrash. And first up, we have the USA's own Prezir. That's a Serbian word. It's probably pronounced differently, but it means scorn or contempt. And this record is called Depredation, and it's released on tape on Dread Records. And aside from that, is currently an independent release on Bandcamp. I really think a label should pick these guys up for vinyl or a CD release. So next is Panychida, whose record is Gabreta Aeterna on Folter Records. And Folter's a great label. We've covered their stuff before, back with the Committee.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And Panychida is a Czech band, and he plays kind of extremely, hyper melodic, kind of folky, kind of black metal-y, kind of heavy metal stuff. Oh, and I guess I should have said Prezir is kind of basically blackthrash, but with a lot of really catchy parts.
All right.
And, yeah, your turn.
All right, so opening up my half, new record by a project, a Dutch project called Duister Maanlicht, with the title Over Zwarte Kunsten, Hexerij en Andere Dienaren van het Kwaad. This is actually a Christian black metal record released on Vision of God Records, who I've got a little bit of familiarity with, Christian label. They've put out stuff by El Gabor and Vials of Wrath, who are a kind of interesting revision of, like, sort of Agalok mixed with, like, Cascadian black metal, but much better than that actually sounds. So, but now that we've got ourselves just releasing, you know, a Christian Transylvanian hunger worship record that actually ends up being really good. And to wrap up the night, we have the new record by Gjendod with Angrep, which is out on Hell Thrasher Productions, two-man band out of Norway, Trondheim specifically, I think, who've done several records that the black metal guy is familiar with, but I just stumbled across these guys and was really impressed and decided to bring them on the show.
They're really good.
Yes, they are. All right, so first on the docket, we got Prezir with Depredation. And did these guys reach out to you, or they're like friends of friends, or something like that?
Yeah, so Grizzly Butt said, this is coming out. Are you guys reviewing it? I don't have, I can't fit it on my schedule. You guys should do, and it seems good for you. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, I know of this band, and I've sort of heard them before. So, yeah, we'll probably like it. And then they got in touch. So yeah, I know of Prezir through Finn, the dearly departed, and I would group them, also a Chicago band, and group them in the same kind of general nexus, as kind of like musically proficient, epic, elitist North American black metal.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of, and you could incorporate Into Oblivion into that constellation, even though they're from Canada, I'd say. Serious-looking guys who wear shirts for the Chasm. On the Metal Archives page, they've got a guy in a Finn shirt and a Finn hoodie and a guy in a Chasm shirt. The music is based in, based, I guess, in kind of cruel thrash metal. You could liken it to something like Ares Kingdom or Gospel of the Horns, maybe. And the lyrics as a sort of a big part of this band. The vocalist has done a lot of, or the vocalist and songwriter, Luka Dordovic, the vocalist. Is that, yeah. He's done a lot of research on the lyrics and from reading history stuff, and he's got kind of an interesting perspective. He writes lyrics based on all kinds of historical scenarios, kind of like historical disasters, wars, whatnot, and it kind of gives this many-sided perspective. So writing from a bunch of different perspectives. There's a lot of nuance here. There's a kind of sort of consistent ethos coming through. Sort of a very idiosyncratic take on the world. It
is very no step on Sneck. Yeah.
Very no step on Sneck, yeah. So he's got this kind of anti-modern, heroic warrior value kind of attitude, but at the same time it's defiantly individualist in a very American way, right?
It's got a kind of a similar vibe to The Committee, like distrustful of all power structures, be they left or right.
Yeah, fits in well in that sense on Folter, and he's got on the first full length, or on the last full length, as Rats Devour Lions, I believe they've got a song called like Plagiarized Infamy, where he's criticizing the sort of Slavic NS thing for sort of investing in a sort of German supremacist racial theory that led to a lot of Slavs getting thrown in ditches.
Yeah.
And he's like, what are you guys doing? You're Slavs. And so, but also very critical of communism. So I think you said the last track on this new record is Peasantry Messiah.
Oh yeah, that's just basically a greatest hits collection of like communist human rights disasters, pretty much. So.
Yeah, lots of Vietnam and stuff like that, and also Cambodia, I think.
Yeah, heavy on Cambodia. Yeah.
And he looks at these sort of communist peasant revolts as sort of he draws out the parallels between things like that and sort of like the rise of ancient Christianity. But he's also just got cool lyrics about like the Falcon and the Lion Heart, about just like, Richard the Lionheart and Saladin, sort of noble warriors facing each other down in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of cool history lyrics, interesting perspective, depth to that side of things. As far as the music, what do you make of it, dude?
Well, that's an interesting conversation because we actually argued about this for a while before we started the show this time. It's kind of more than usual. We're always arguing with each other and telling each other how bad each other's takes are on things, but this is interesting. So this is foundationally just kind of nuts and bolts a sort of black thrash record, right?
Mm-hmm.
At least in a large part. But what we take away from it and what we really see it as is very different, because one big thing that I draw a lot of parallels to is Americanized melodeath. Specifically stuff like the Black Dahlia murder, and closer to black thrash, stuff like Skeletonwitch. Sort of unusually mainstream points of reference for music that is, at least in the case of this record, much more extreme than those bands and much more technical in a lot of ways. There's a big technical edge on this record that surprised me. These are really accomplished musicians, but I think if you take away some of the more kind of biting and angular stuff and some of the really impressive technical flash, you get something that's secretly a lot more accessible than you would think at first blush.
Yeah. So I think like Black Dahlia murder that's going a little far, man. I think, so as far as I can tell, those bands have nothing to do with the musical ancestry of this band. Maybe pulling on a common well of influences in heavy metal and thrash. But I can meet you insofar as parts of this are extremely catchy, mm-hmm. right? Very melodic, hook driven. I think those angular moments are way more important to. They're through, like, probably in terms of total time on the record, those angular moments are probably like 50% of it, I'd say. So they're like pretty important. I see what you mean about the Skeletonwitch thing, though, in the sense that that was something that some YouTube commenter wrote, right?
I think it's a guy on the Bandcamp. It's a French comment, but they actually compared it to both Skeletonwitch and Black Dahlia, as well as Vital Remains for some reason, which I didn't get, but okay.
So like I think comparisons like that can be useful because they show you something. I guess what I would say is probably going on is like there's this thing in animals, in like evolution or in biology, where it's like homologous versus analogous structures. So it's like if you point to the spot to like a whale's flipper, you can be like, that's a homologous structure with a dog's leg, because mm-hmm. whales are sea doggos. But if you look at like a bird's wing and a bat's wing, those are like analogous structures. They do the same thing. They even kind of look basically the same, but they evolve differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of see this as coming from a different basis, maybe, from some of this American melodic metal stuff, but having kind of a similar outline. in maybe in ways that people who are more invested in the more extreme side of this wouldn't recognize. I also think, we talked about this before. I think it's fair to say that Skeletonwitch, if they'd been less invested in pop structures and had not had the goofy cover art, would have been, I think, could have been a pretty, well, they were a good band or a great band, and they could have been like a force to be reckoned with as a serious black thrash band.
Yeah, and now with some personnel swaps, they've their last record is like way more serious because they started listening to a bunch of McGlaw and stuff like that and started trying to fold that in. It's been very divisive for their fan base. I've never really listened to them a whole lot.
I couldn't get that into the new one. I appreciate the move though.
They're trying. They're trying to do something more serious. Although I think you're probably
a couple years since that one.
Yeah, that's true. I guess that was a couple years ago now, wasn't it? But yeah, I think you're right. I bet if you took a Skeletonwitch record and you put the CD in like a Gospel of the Horns like jewel case, yeah, probably more people in the underground would have been into it.
Would have been received very differently. Yeah, or if you recorded the guitars just a little quote unquote worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, things like that, for sure. We're just like, hey, could you take that one riff and play it 16 times instead of 4? But anyway, so we have different ideas of where this is coming from. I think I've said where it's coming from. Stuff like Gospel of the Horns or stuff like this kind of sort of robust, sort of contemptuous sounding black thrash stuff that's highly melodic. But why don't you make your case for the melodic stuff first?
Okay, well, here's a good example that I pulled just as a first sample. This is off a track called Deprivation Doctrine. It's the third track on the record. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the kind of big, explosive, sort of Melodeath style moments that they pop up across the record, and they're, it's one of the reasons I kind of have my impressions of the record that I do. So let's try that out real quick. Okay, so that's not an unfair comparison, at least for that part, right?
Well, the whole first two riffs leading into that were very not metalcore in a way that I'll try to...
I never said metalcore.
Okay, sorry, melodic death metal. Very not melodic death metal. But that last thing, I can sort of see what you're getting at. It's like, is it the rhythm of it?
I mean, definitely. Well, I think...
The note choice strikes me as very different from Melodeath, unless this is something... I know Black Dahlia, which is a good band, has some skronky parts in some of their later stuff. Is it more like that? So, yeah, they like, for one, like that palm-muted riff, that is very like a Black Dahlia kind of technique. Structurally, it's very Black Dahlia. And I would actually argue that the earlier riffs, especially that really fast Phrygian noodling thing... I think you'll hear that in a lot of kind of more mainstream, kind of melodic death metal bands here and there. Because, I mean, obviously, they're pulling it from different places, these guys here in Prezir. But,
they're arriving at a similar place, I guess.
Huh. Yeah. I mean, the fast Phrygian thing. I know that I know there is technical stuff like that on BDM. Yeah, maybe. I mean, Black Dahlia also is remarkable for being a band that's kind of in that melodic death metal kind of core-y segment that clearly has a very deep record collection.
Yeah,
and listens to a bunch of classic black and death metal.
Definitely, yeah. They've always been they're serious underground guys who happened to get big,
Yeah, so I mean, I hear the Phrygian thing right before it as kind of flashy in a way that more kind of accessible music often is. I've got another basis for comparison, which I think is what this record really sounds like to me. And this kind of relates to your view too. Okay. I want to go to "Sacrificed the Honored Dead," and I'll say this gives us a little more of an outline of the sound as a whole. We start on a kind of thrashy part with a guitar solo. Lots of solos here. The solos, would you agree, are worth listening to? Good?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, they're folded into the body of the music very well. They don't feel like they're just kind of dropped in to be a solo. It feels like they have real musical purpose.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, cool. So let's go to, about a little over a minute into the first track, "Sacrifice the Honored Dead."
All right. So what do you think that really sounds like?
Well, we are completely in character on this review because you're arguing for a connection to Melodeath, and I'm saying it sounds like Soren. I've name dropped them before a couple times on this show because I feel like they're one of those bands that more people should listen to. But the thing that I really compared to them before, I did. If you're interested in obscure, marginal Swedish Black Death, check out the episode we did on Svederne. But I would say that like Svederne sound kind of like the folky parts of Soren. But Soren kind of pioneered certain kinds of abrasive disharmony and weird chord changes, weird shifts to major and stuff, in ways that kind of anticipated a lot of later bands. And those kind of more dissonant or abrasive parts you're hearing on here really remind me of them. And especially of their second album, Apocalypse Angle, which maybe you'd even like better than their first stuff. It's just this completely it's like their early stuff is very midnight forest blackwoods kind of thing.
Yeah.
Very sort of running through the woods, howling kind of vibe. This is Apocalypse Angel is much more urban, And it's just this sort of absurd cocaine riff fest. It's kind of like what a band like Imperial Triumphant thinks it sounds like. When the guy from Imperial Triumphant does a line of Below, he thinks he sounds like Soren. So let's and this part, it's all like weirdly fun and weirdly rockish and catchy in a way that kind of relates to what you're saying. So let's go to Apocalypse's Angel. This is the title track, just right off the beginning of it.
All right. Oh, that is some unfriendly production on that. Jesus Christ.
That's what? Sorry, I was still listening to the sample. What did you say?
That is some unfriendly production. That is woof.
Oh, yeah. Extremely.
God, that is just like like someone scratching your eardrum with a big fake acrylic nail.
Yeah, definitely has a please don't listen to this music kind of quality.
Yeah.
And the Prezir has that a bit too. It's a very deliberately cold and thin production.
Really, you think so? Because I think it's I think it's pretty even and professional for what it is. Like
I don't mean unprofessional or uneven. I mean kind of deliberately like, here are our riffs. You will hear only the riffs. We're not interested in body and the guitar tone. We want you to hear the riffs as kind of like abstract relations.
Okay, so you mean more just like kind of flat in a way.
Yeah, no, Prezir doesn't like hurt your ears in the way that the Soren might. Although, honestly, my ears feel so good. But basically, the thing I wanted to get at is kind of like, you hear how like they flip it around to that bizarre manic major key thing.
Yeah, that weird rock part.
That's the same kind of maneuver that Prezir were doing in Sacrifice to the Honored Dead when they bring in the big catchy riff.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
I feel like the Sorhin is like way further down that rabbit hole than these guys are. But,
sure. It's definitely weirder and a lot more frenetic, but you can also hear it sounding kind of thrashy.
Yeah, no, I get that.
And the disharmonic blasting riffs are pretty, like the two riffs that led in Deprivation Doctrine, those, even the Crazy Phrygian one, those sound pretty Soren to me.
I mean, yeah, there was some Phrygian stuff in that Sorhin sample, too. So.
Exactly, yeah, they were big on scales like that.
I gotcha. No, I guess I think the thing that we're in character because what we're hearing on this record is the stuff that's most relevant to our interests. I think that you... And it's like we're placing probably like outsized importance on our parts, you know what I mean? Because I'm placing kind of an outsized importance on like the catchy parts, and then what you're really paying attention to most are the most kind of aggressive and kind of churning and extreme parts.
I think that's right, but maybe in that sense we're kind of doing it justice, because I think basically there's like a black thrash chassis or framework. That's the basic genre convention. It'd be hard to pick out. There are individual riffs that sound like that, but a lot of it skews to either one of these sides.
Yeah, I mean it does have a framework that it's operating within, and I think that honestly there's a lot of stuff on this that you can kind of compare to that Mort Grinning album we were covering the other day. Same sort of like just ultra high octane energy stuff.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. I think that's right. Yeah, I bet that's an influence on these guys too. I mean, the old Mark Grinning. Let's go. Here's a sample that has, I think, more than anything else we picked. It has more of the thrashing kind of stuff. This one is, this is Terrors of the Steppe. This is about Genghis Khan and the Mongols, I believe. And this starts us more in kind of the generic territory that I think is the home base for this band.
Okay, let's try it.
Right? And then goes to the place that we both wanted to go.
Okay, let's go. What is best in life? That's very crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentations of their women. Yeah, I mean, it's the exact big moment you expect and want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with doing the predictable thing if the predictable thing is that good, you know?
Yeah, and I think this is a spot also. Another band that I mentioned peripherally a lot on this show that I bet is a reference point for these guys, I mean, possibly they're friends of them, is Scythian from the UK, who you still need to hear and you would, I think, like a lot. But, right, Scythian has this kind of base of Altars of Madness, Morbid Angel, and thrash, the thrashiest parts of Altars of Madness, plus kinds of these massive Conan the Barbarian melodies. And this part is like a more kind of, this whole part, that whole sequence felt like a more kind of agile, kind of melodically, a more agile, note-heavy version of Scythian. You know, kind of like lots of space being filled in on these sort of like scale runs and stuff.
Yeah, no, there's a real ambition. I mean, this is driven by, it's music that is driven by a very ostentatious and technically accomplished sort of guitar style.
It sounds like they're angry at contemporary metal.
You think so?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot of like really kind of modern ideas at work here.
Maybe, but I think they're also, it sounds like they're trying to swing for the bleachers in the way we, like maybe sonically very modern. It doesn't sound dated, that's for sure. You know, whether you want to focus on the accessible, whether you want to focus on the hooks or the skronky parts, like those are both very modern. But like, in terms of its ambition, You know what I mean? And this is some sort of idea they're trying to encompass a lot of different metal feelings here, right?
It's trying to be full spectrum and reach into a lot of different kind of reference points from throughout the history of this style.
Yeah, it's like even more. It's like not even full spectrum black metal because it's beyond black metal, right? And not really Norwegian sounding at all. Yeah, I mean, so it's like I think the band is called Scorn. I feel like there's this kind of like you say about Trey Azagthoth all the time, right? Or you love Trey. I love this quotation, but you love Trey Azagthoth, right? Like the idea that he wanted people to hear his music and quit.
Yeah.
I feel like they're trying to do that.
I can get that sense, definitely. Mm-hmm. So let me get to my last sample real quick. So this is one of my favorite parts on the record, and of course this is the one. This is going to be a common theme on today's episode. I keep choosing songs with titles that are completely impossible for me, and this is off Curvo Prolis e Propost, something like that. I don't know.
Curvo Prolice e Propost.
Yeah, I don't know what an isolated C means in Serbian or Croatian or whatever it is. So let's give this.
I know
one
there's
shot.
a band from around there called Propost that's really quite good, but who knows what it means? Probably something black metal.
Probably. So let's try this one real quick because this is some of my favorite lead stuff on the record.
All right.
So that's definitely one of the best riffs on the album.
That was pretty sick.
I mean, you know our thing for super long riffs, and that is a really fucking long one. And,
this band has a lot of long riffs.
Yeah, that's true. They do have a lot of them. But that I think actually the best track on the album is the final one, Peasantry Messiah, which is like this bizarre sort of like Melodeath meets Pest Noir kind of thing, which sounds awful in the abstract, but it works really well for
I think to both of us that sounds like a good idea.
Usually the ideas that sound like bad ideas are usually good ones.
Take out there's like in the Pest Noir formula, there's like a slot for the tasteless part. And so hip hop is currently in that slot. You take that out, you put in some Melodeath.
Yeah, it's like whatever gimmick they're working with for the given album, just remove that and put actual music into it. Yeah. So I really love that super involved, high-flying lead part.
Yeah.
But then I left some more in there just because I will say, and the big point where you and I differ, and it really is just a matter of taste, is that the blackthrash format in general doesn't do a lot for me. And I can see why it does for you, because the sort of riffs that you're really interested in tend to be those more chromatic, more kind of rhythmically complex, sort of Swedish and just generally kind of Scandinavian-inspired riff structures, which I think we talked about.
Those kind of riffs at the end.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's the same thing with, like, to link it back, like you were talking earlier, the Aeterna record, which is, like, I appreciate that it's good, but it's for an audience that's just completely different for me, you know? But I will say this record does have enough of these kind of, like, huge explosive moments to keep me hooked, even if the sort of foundational sound isn't something that I've ever really been into.
You know, and to see it from your eyes, in a way that's, to be many-sided, like Prezir, I mean, I think, like, I think that what you're right about with blackthrash is that there's a tendency sometimes to be locked into the idea that this has to be a blackthrash song. Mm-hmm. And if I wanted to be really anal, I could probably go through this record and find a number of spots, because these are very long songs, where it's like, there's a feeling of, okay, we have to play a thrash riff now. Where it's not necessarily where the momentum is with the song.
It tends to be a sort of restrictive stylistic form. And obviously you can transcend it, and these guys do a lot. But I would say if there's one thing that's limiting this record, it's those moments of feeling limited by the whole blackthrash process.
Yeah, I think it says something that almost all the parts we chose have either this, like, heavy metal, melodeath feel and or kind of frantic, geometric black metal vibe.
Those are definitely the most... Yeah,
so they're kind of playing to either side of their format. And maybe for the next record, like, I will never sniff at a good black thrash riff, but maybe another record they could try moving structurally outside that paradigm more.
Yeah, you delete the center, you know, and you're just left with the edges. And then you can get something, like, super bizarre out of that, I think.
I don't think we even heard my favorite big hook riff on this record. And, like, that's fine. Because, like, there's just... Like, each track has, like, a massive melodeath riff or something, or massive heavy metal riff or whatever.
Yeah, and, I mean, because these are generally, like, 6 to 7 minute songs. Mm-hmm. And, it does say something for me as a guy who is not generally into the style in its basic form. It always kept my attention. This is definitely... This record won't let you treat it as background listening. It's like snapping its fingers at you. No, here, new riff, let's go.
That is definitely true. Yeah, and I think one more thing that bears to be said is that you said it somewhere in the notes, but they are really good at writing these long riffs that develop within the riff so that you can repeat the riff like 4 times, 8 times. You can do, like, black metal levels of repetition on these hook riffs.
Yeah, just because there's so much going on internally. Well, which is like Into Oblivion. It's like Into Oblivion. Into Oblivion doesn't do it just because they're insane, but any Into Oblivion riff can be played 16 times and it would make sense.
Oh, they do play some of them 16 times, but they're like the simpler riffs, the more kind of macabre omen kind of riffs.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But instead, they just decided to, do them 4 times and then do some more all-timer riffs that would be, the end of another band's career. No, overall, I do like this. I'm kind of interested in hearing the first record now. Have you heard that one?
I have heard whichever one came out. I might have heard the very first record in this. I think I might have heard Contempt, and I was just like, I think at the time I was like, it also had this very kind of sparse production and was more thrashy. Mm-hmm. And I think at the time it just wasn't what I was looking for. I was kind of just like, well, this is weird. Maybe I'll come back to this at some point.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to check out some of the earlier stuff and see what the progression for this band has been. So, because I am interested. Yeah, I'm interested in kind of where they're going and where they're coming from.
I think it's moving more towards the outsides of the style. I think Contempt was thrashier.
Okay. I'll definitely check out the first full length and kind of see how that stacks up next to this, because those outside parts, those outer parts of the style, that's the direction for this band. I think that's the coolest stuff.
And just to round it off, I thought of a good way to sort of sum up the lyrical perspective here, or just the ethos, which is like, I think I'd describe Prezir as anti-stupidity. Sort of anti any kind of stupidity, and pro-reading books.
Well, I don't know if I support that. I've never read a goddamn book in my life, and I'm not about to start now because some Serbs told me to do it. So
oral history only. We're a podcast, so we have a vested interest.
Exactly. The medium is the message, after all. All right, so good record. Let's take a quick break and come back with some real cheery stuff. All right.
This is a little one Gash, and you're listening to Terminus.
All right, next up, how do you pronounce it? Is it Panychida?
Panychida.
Panychida with Gabreta Aeterna. How do you know these guys? You ever listen to any of their old stuff? Because I've never heard of them.
No. It's, this was completely random for me. I think, it must have, obviously it's like, weird. I mentioned Folter on the last one when we were doing Prezir, but that's because Prezir had a record out on Folter in the past.
Oh, okay.
So this one is literally out on Folter right now, and so I presume it just came up in my Bandcamp feed.
Yeah.
But they're a Czech band. I've been getting more into. I'd always avoided the Czech and sort of Slovak stuff just because I could never get that into Root and Master's Hammer.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But through some stuff I've done for the show, I found that label from Slovakia, Hexen Cave Productions, really like basically everything they put out. And also was checked out a bunch of stuff by the guy Blackosh from Root, Kales, which is kind of related to this musically. But yeah, he's Czech. And so I'm digging back into that stuff. So I was obviously interested in this. And this is a very regionally specific record. He comes from Shumawa, something like that, which is in the region called South Bohemia. And it's near the mountains and near a forest that in Germany is called the Bavarian Forest. It's a forest that spans between Germany and the southern part of Czechia. And I've kind of been to this region, or sort of near this region, a little further south. I've been to České Budějovice and Český Krumlov, and in České Budějovice there's a really good metal record store. And I've talked about that store on this show before, because going there it became clear, the idea of rock music here
spans everything.
It just is metal.
Yeah.
The default idea of rock music is metal, and it was like a general record store, but you could go and buy spiked bracelets and a Marduk t-shirt. I got a really sick.
Isn't that the world we all want to live in?
Exactly. I got a really sick Manowar shirt, but on the other hand, right, we talk about in extreme metal a lot about how the default Czech and Slovak metal sound, like black metal sound, is very heavy metal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so this band definitely exists at that juncture. And I think of them kind of like, given that it's this kind of folkloric mountain woodland music and it's very heavy metal, this band strikes me as like a much more engaging version of Malokarpatan.
No idea who that is.
Malokarpatan has been popular for the last five or so years. It's basically like folkloric Slovak black metal that sounds a lot like Venom.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've totally drawn a blank on that name.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't like it. It's fine. Some of the dude's other projects are actually awesome and are on Hexen Cave, but this is just too sort of like first wave worship kind of.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah.
But this is like that kind of idea but delivered totally differently. So what did you make of it?
This is a power metal record. Hold on. This one is for Warg from Heretical Sect. There we are. This is a power metal record.
Nice.
It is a power metal record that is kind of gussied up with blast beats here and there, and, harsh vocals, but melodically, the vast majority of this is a sort of folky power metal. That being said, it's a great power metal record. So I have no complaints about that. But I do find, labeling it black metal very funny to me, just because the genre description is just so bizarre. Like this is so melodic and so triumphant and so in debt to Iron Maiden that it's like I'm sure these guys are dudes that listen to a lot of black metal and probably come from that scene, but yeah, man, this scans as like a sort of pagan-y power metal record to me, and it's actually excellent. It's got a great sense of scope. The songs are really kind of rich and complex without becoming overbearing or kind of overly bloated, like some kind of the epic European power metal stuff can become. It's sort of peasant power metal in a way. It's like it has
definitely a very peasant feel.
Very peasant feel, and I think that it owes a lot. I think one of the things that makes it different is that I think it owes a lot more to kind of US style burly kind of muscular power metal than it does the more like effete, flowery Euro style that a lot of people associate with the term power metal.
Yeah, people think you're talking about like Halloween or like I don't even know the names of these other bands.
Oh, beyond dude, Halloween is fucking Arnold Schwarzenegger compared to some of the stuff out there. Nah, like Sonata Arctica and shit like that, which I do have a soft spot for, but yeah, I know exactly what it is. Mm-hmm. Honestly, though, this is a fun fucking record, though. This is party music all the way.
So yeah, does it sound like? Is it? I mean, when you think about power metal, I think of like how is it structured? These songs don't really seem structured like power metal songs, but I hear what you're saying in terms of a lot of the riffing here, and it's this sort of big, punchy, epic heavy metal riffing that is irresistibly good. Another band I compared this to would be Macabre Omen.
I can see the same generative kind of linking quality of traditional heavy metal, and probably a lot of the kind of like 70s and 80s rock we talked about when we covered that Macabre Omen record.
Yeah, and that it's this kind of really, this is very large scale music, deals in like huge gestures, and is very folky, very metal, but still exists kind of in this black metal universe, kind of spiritually speaking.
I get that, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to lead with one of the most black metal parts, and just right off the bat, I was like, well, this album is fucking sick. So this is from, I won't pronounce this right, this is from the second track, Billy Summum.
Man, I really love the bass stuff occurring at the end there. You see, well, it's interesting because in the notes you kind of connected it to Take, but I think this is like this sample in particular has a lot more to do with like enslaved.
I could hear that too. I was just thinking that lead melody. Da, 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 da,
Yeah, that's kind of a play on the sort of thing Take would do, but then when it kind of it breaks down doing into that sort of like Isa or rune style enslaved stuff with like that spoken word passage and that kind of intricate bass line underneath. I really like that a lot. By the way, kind of an aside, I don't talk about this a lot on the show. The production on this record is outstanding. Incredibly rich, not over polished, but it's almost an ideal for what a professional, like mass market heavy metal record should sound like. This is a record that sounds beautiful throughout.
Not that this really is a mass market metal record.
Well, I'm saying if you were to, what I think the ideal form of production, if...
Oh, I see.
Yeah, like, I think that if you were... I think that records on Nuclear Blast or Century Media should sound more like this.
I get what you mean. Yeah. No, I was also struck by the sound quality. And, that's not a thing I even think about much. It's very, I don't know, all the clear separation in the parts, is that right? Also very...
It's, I mean, because there, especially in the most intense moments, there's a lot of different voices going on with, kind of, various layers of kind of symphonic stuff or like folk stuff alongside the whole band and vocals, and you can clearly separate them all but while really listening to it. Very difficult to do.
Rich organic textures that still sound heavy, right? So when I hear something arranged like that, I think Enslaved is a good comparison. I listened to Rune a fair amount back in the day, but I also, when I hear like huge glorious melodic hook riff, and then kind of more atmospheric part with bass wandering under the chords, maybe some spoken word, I think of the Ukrainian band Kroda.
Okay.
Yeah. Sort of like complex Slavic black metal that sounds very Slavic, but has a lot of connection to Norwegian stuff in a way that like Drukdh doesn't really, not as closely.
Yeah, no, there's definitely, well, it's interesting because what do you think of when you think of Czech black metal or Czech metal in general is generally a sort of kind of sawing kind of you're thinking of Maniac Butcher, and you're thinking of Inferno, and you're thinking of Kultov and Zivi and shit like that, where it's this very sawing kind of dissonant black metal that still has this intense connection to traditional heavy metal and rock music in a lot of ways. So it's interesting. I think this is the first kind of like folk style record I've heard out of Czechia. So it's interesting because it falls kind of like you were saying in this perfect middle point between sort of Scandinavian stuff and Slavic.
Yeah, for sure. So we've heard, I think that gives us a pretty good take on what the black metal component of this record sounds like.
All right.
Take us in.
Nikoho pan, nikoho sluha. From the beginning, and I will immediately compare it to something else, but this is what I'm talking about when I say it's a power metal record, so check this out. Oh, fuck yeah. Fuck yeah, dude.
Yeah, that's sick.
That main riff is so perfect, and then when they get into that fast palm-muted tremolo riff, that little modulation they do halfway through, that's almost like an old Dream Theater thing, like Images and Words era. They would kind of do faster riffs with that kind of modulation in it. And it's such a simple technique, but it does so much. God, this is one of my favorite tracks on the album. But yeah, I think this is the case where it's like, oh, that's power metal, straight up, you know?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And, but to compare it to something, I got a sample off an early Jagdpanzer record. This is the title track off a record called Chain of Command. It's kind of a weird one in their discography because it was supposed to be their second album, then it got shelved and released later, and then there's been alternate versions of it with other vocalists, but the original version is the one we're going to listen to. And this is just technically the intro is a different track, but it's 20 seconds long, so it's in there, and this is the title track off Chain of Command. So let's check this out. So yeah, there's some pretty distinct similarities there, I think, in the way they're constructing riffs.
Yeah, how do you explain that? Because the lead riff doesn't really sound like the lead riff off the Panychida. So.
No, it doesn't, but like the opening riff, that kind of ascending palm-muted tremolo melody, remind me a lot, as well as that kind of skronky bridge riff after the first chorus, that dun-dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun, is something that you'll hear kind of in a different version across this record. I guess overall I'm going for kind of a tonal similarity of, I think they're accessing a lot of old, like, US power metal. I think, well, I mean, more obvious than Jagdpanzer would be, I think there's a lot of Manowar across this record.
Oh, well, hell yeah. I love Manowar.
Other bands play.
Manowar kills.
But yeah, and then, like, if you're into Manowar, then Jagdpanzer is basically like, alright, let's do Manowar, but kind of like pump up the energy a little bit.
Yeah,
you know?
I liked that a lot. It's less, some of the Manowar sounds a little too AC/DC, and this is...
there's nothing wrong with sounding like AC/DC, come on.
No, but you know what I mean. It just
Yeah, no, I know what you mean, yeah.
Like, I want it to all sound like Hail and Kill, and it's, you know.
Yeah, I want it to all sound like Gods of War, so...
So, alright, so yeah, no, I hear you on the power metal thing. The other thing that riff specifically reminded me of was a band called Summerlands that came out, that's with one M, like the Fields of the Nephilim song,
Okay.
and they released one record in 2016 and then haven't been active since then. I think they share members with Eternal Champion, who I like a lot less. But I'm imagining Summerlands is drawing on some similar source for that style of, like, a really, really active palm muted riff. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can definitely hear stuff like that on some like Twisted Tower Dire, you know?
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I only know them by reputation because collabed with Solstice.
Oh, they're fucking fantastic. I mean, they were one of the bands that basically resurrected power metal in the United States, like resurrected USPM. I mean, they did it almost single-handedly. They're the reason that scene still exists in the U.S.
They were ahead of the curve on the sort of medieval armor album covers.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right. So, here is, I suppose, as far as like big epic hook parts that are flagrantly melodic and kind of power metal. Let's go for this on Trampus. I don't know. Maybe that's the Czech version of Krampus? Who knows?
Well, Trampus, but are we going to ignore the incredibly long subtitle after it?
Trampus. Samota Shmurti v Odlejchich Konchinak. I can't do that one. Is that the challenge for this band?
I'll tell you. I'll do my own. I'll do my best attempt at my second sample.
Well, you surprised me there. All right. So let's start
Trampus.
this one about a minute in. Trampus.
Let's do it. It's so fun, dude. I gotta show this to my power metal friends, my power prog dudes that I hang out with. They would fucking shit a brick over this album, man.
Dude, every riff in that is the big riff.
For really? Another band, yeah. It would be the capstone riff for the song by any other band. Here it's just 5 of them in a row.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Starts with a really good Black Death riff and then just keeps rolling. The thrash riff is so well done.
Mm-hmm.
Or the, power metal thrash riff. The thing with that the thing that turns around with those octaves and then it just keeps getting better, man. The thing I love about the chorus is, it's one of the only clean vocal moments on this record. And I'm glad there isn't too much of the clean singing here, but
I really love it.
Outstanding.
I could actually do with more of the clean singing. I think it's underutilized on this record because especially the way they do it. It's this kind of Slav shout, kind of chant thing.
Well, what I was going to say was that it's not really a power metal vocal. I wouldn't want them to be I wouldn't want them to be doing those vocals over the aggressive parts. But the thing that he does there, it's like a folk. That really sounds like folk music or folk sounding rock music from Eastern Europe. I've heard Serbian. They're I have friends who are really into old like stuff from Yugoslavia, where you get kind of singing like that, but it also sounds kind of like, it sounds kind of like the folk samples you get on a Drukdh record.
Yeah, it does. Well, I mean, it's all Eastern European stuff feeding into each other with kind of their own, like, distinct regional spins. That's one of the fun things about European folk.
It's very charismatic kind of storyteller delivery. It's, like, not metal singing at all, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's cool. It's more spoken word in a way, but it still has that rhythmic impetus, because it's really cool because he's doing like a triplet rhythm against the 4/4 beat there.
Yeah, and he's following he follows the melody, and he's not, the guitars are elsewhere, but he's on the root note, and you get like a good, often metal vocals is just like, oh god, I have to hit the root note over and over again, and then I'll go up an octave.
Yeah.
Metal, especially extreme metal clean vocals, there's often this question, like, where do we put them in the mix? And he just sings a melody. Because it's just
great.
It's so good.
It is really so good.
Yeah, major patriotic vibes there.
All right, so here's the thing. I was listening to this record last night, prepping for the show, and I saw this. I saw the 7th track, and I was thinking to myself before I got to it, it's like, I really hope that track's not sick, because I gotta get 2 samples for the show, and I really hope that's not one that I need to sample, because then I will have to say this title on the show. And of course, it ended up being one of the sickest songs on the album. I probably made that happen with my own will. So here is a passage off Valechna Besnieni Pripravujishi Krajenu Sumabasku Ojeji Sini Uvadaijishi Vusvar Misni Lid.
Oof. All right, let's try.
Was it completely off? Well, you're the Czech guy, so
it's certain. I mean, it sounded like somebody trying to read an Eastern European language. There's like a lot of people would have done it worse. I think. You have an idea of how it sounds. I don't know that I'll do much better than you, but Valechna Besneni. That one is so difficult. Yeah, who knows?
Pripravujishi.
Yeah, if you really try. Yeah, that was pretty good. Pripravujishi Krajinu Shumavsku ojei sini uvadejiki visvar misni lid. Oh god.
Jesus Christ. So yeah, I was like, I hope this isn't a banger, and it is. So let's listen to it.
Dude, that title's basically a drinking game right there.
Yeah, it is. All right, let's do it.
If you look too hard at the letters, it becomes impossible to say.
Oh god, there's so many syllables and everything.
All right.
Okay.
All right, so let's go.
So
damn, dude.
It's so sick. It's so sick.
Yeah, definitely one of the most black metal moments on the record, but still has that just epic sing-along feeling throughout it.
Oh, dude, like, it's, God, I'm trying to think of it. It reminds me very specifically of a riff on something we covered way earlier in the podcast, but I'm kind of drawing a blank on which it was. It does remind me...
The question is, which riff? Because they were all incredible.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
no,
like...
It was one of the middle ones. What this does remind me of in a kind of abstract way is a band we covered a few episodes ago, They Came From Visions, who obviously are much more traditionally black metal than these guys, but have that same peasant folk quality. And there's certain melodic ideas that are kind of shared here.
I hear this as being more black metal than that, just because that's so focused on being, like, atmospheric and remote.
Yeah, I can get that. I mean, well, at least parts like this are more distinctly black metal. Obviously, when I say this is just a power metal album, that is kind of a joke. I think it is substantially a power metal album. Obviously, it is.
Their Bandcamp, their Metal Archives thing says pagan metal, and that's not a genre you or I really fuck with much. But I kind of get how.
Well, it's kind of a. I mean, it just means any sort of folky black stuff, basically.
Yeah, stuff that sounds kind of like black metal, kind of like power metal. So I guess this is, but a lot of it just isn't good, and this is, this sounds both a lot like black metal and a lot like power metal.
Yeah, it's I think this might be, this is kind of a dark horse for being one of my favorite albums of the year, I think.
Same. I'm not even sure it's a dark horse. I'd probably put this pretty high on my top 10.
This is just so well made. And
it's masterful. Yeah.
You know how it is for me, because I'm always inclined to go for the underdog of some, like, scratchy tape that I just connect with on a personal level. But occasionally you find an album like this where it's just... They are just so equipped to play this music. And like you said, it is masterful. This band has apparently been around for like 20 years. And you can hear every year of it in the way they construct these songs. Honestly, what I really want to say? This is the sort of thing that should be on, or rather, this is the sort of thing that should be on, like, Napalm Records, but Napalm Records should be the kind of label that signs stuff like this. This should be at the forefront of kind of, like, popular kind of folk metal.
I get what you mean. Like, this is in the league of Primordial at their best.
Absolutely. This is, and God knows that's not to say anything bad about Folter, one of the best labels out there right now, but I see no reason that this should not be a name that draws crowds on tours like something way inferior like Corpiclani does.
Well, yeah, and that's the cool thing. This band could do that without watering down their sound at all.
Yeah,
you don't have to make it. This music isn't really poppy. It's just incredibly compelling and melodic.
Well, it's not poppy, but it is very accessible.
Oh,
it's
that's kind of what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like there's something
They're not
immediate.
structured like pop songs, but if you like heavy metal, my God, if this doesn't move you, you know.
Oh, I mean, but even that, it's like I'll probably end up showing this record to my wife. And she'll probably get into it just because there's such this elemental, very essential quality to the songwriting. It's extremely varied. You know, this is a great record to show people that aren't into metal, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm half Czech. I'll show this to my mom. I'll be like, Mom, there are going to be some parts with the screaming, and, you know, I know you don't like those parts, but just listen to this for a minute.
Definitely.
They're just singing about folklore, don't worry. Speaking of which, I want to do a quick thing on the lyrics. It really is sort of, this album in particular is kind of earthy peasant experience themed. Takes the listener on a fascinating journey on the south border of Bohemia into the old times of Shumawa Mountains, in German called Bomerwald. The old traditions and typical customs of the regions are intertwined with the eeriness and magic of the old and deep forests. It's a journey back in time to the beginning of the 20th century and the late 19th century and far beyond, when life was a struggle and death was as close to men as she can only be. As she will be our guide on this path. Life and struggle and hardship and death. Gabreta Aeterna. And how much they don't care about being famous is, with the album you'll receive a book in PDF format, written by Michal Toman. The book is written in Czech language, though, so primarily for Czech listeners.
Yeah, it's just like, we've got a book. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's in Czech. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't it be? You know?
Yeah. And there's another edition of this that I didn't know. So the book comes in the deluxe edition on Epidemie Records. Sounds French. I don't know. EPIDEMIE Records. There's a fancy limited edition, but if you go on the band's Bandcamp, you can find it, or on Folter's Bandcamp, you can find it through there.
So yeah, this is an outstanding record. Love this one to death.
Yeah, strong Terminus endorsement.
I'm gonna be revisiting this a lot, and I'm gonna be showing this to a lot of friends, I think.
Absolutely. Cool, man. All right.
So, do you have an idea for an interlude track? Because I think I've got something that might appeal for this band in particular.
I love appeal. Let's go.
So, this is a now defunct German band called Detonate, who did folk black metal in the early 2000s. They just put out a few records, and it is interesting because it has the kind of dorky earnestness of very early folk metal with some just intensely brutal black metal parts. These guys are just I've got a soft spot for these guys, and very few people know them. In fact, there's very few songs on YouTube available, but here's a really good one called Sonnensglans. Just embrace the Casio keyboards and wait for the bracing drum machine blast beats.
Hey, people love Casios now, right?
Yeah. Now this is probably cool. So,
its time has rolled around. All right, let's rip.
So listen to D-Sate, and we'll be back with the back half of our episode.
All right.
And we are back after some kind of classic dorky black folk metal with something that's also a little bit dorky, but minus the folk. We have Duister Maanlicht, over Zwarte Kunsten, Hexerij, and Andere Dienaren van het Kwaad, which translates to the dark arts, witchcraft, and other servants of evil. A funny title for a Christian black metal record. I guess those are supposed to be bad things. So this was a random find. So Duister Maanlicht is a band that has been around apparently since 2000. And just based off some comments on like the advanced singles for this album, it looks like he's probably releasing like a few records at the same time. Because the last album was back in 2005, so in that 15-year gap, I guess he kind of stocked up a bunch of music, and he's kind of releasing it all at the same time, but this is the first new one that's out. And this is, in a sense, basically like Transylvanian hunger worship. Is that basically fair?
Well, that's interesting. I did not immediately connect it to that, or I immediately connected it to that because that's what you said in the notes, and I listened to this after you made the notes. But wouldn't necessarily be my first thought. That first because you know Transylvanian Hunger better than I do.
Really? Do I?
Oh, way better. Yeah. I barely listened to it.
Oh Jesus! Yeah, I've listened to that album like 100 times. Shit.
Second, it wasn't really what I was looking for when I got into BM. So I've listened to it a couple times, but it's cool. It's good. This is, but also because, this also sounds very Dutch.
It is very Dutch.
It doesn't sound like, how's this? It doesn't sound like what Transylvanian hunger worship sounded like when we were coming up.
Yeah, because there was a lot of it.
In that, it's kind of like Cult Offensive-y, in that Cult Offensive-y is also kind of Transylvanian hunger worship, but doesn't sound like early 2000s versions of that.
Yeah, it's interesting because like on the Bandcamp, they describe this as more Panzerfaust, which I kind of get. Mm-hmm. But this, Panzerfaust kind of brought back in a lot of the Celtic frost that had been lost since Blaze in the Northern Sky.
Yeah.
This is pretty consistently kind of minimal, hypnotic, thrash beat tremolo riff stuff. But I gotta say, I do like this record a lot, and I wonder if it's partly because it's just... I mean, shit, when we were coming up, half the black metal records sounded like this,
Kind of like, yeah. I mean,
I think
half
this
of
is
them were like burrs thrown.
This is a more authentic representation of Transylvanian hunger than most of those were, I think.
That makes sense.
This gets it in a way. So what were your initial impressions of this? Yeah.
I think it's pretty good. I think it's certainly got that gray Dutch sound. I think there are some songs I'm not crazy about. I don't really like the first full track of Duister Maanlicht, Union Vigil by Moonlight. But I think there are places. But I like that it has this extreme simplicity, this Christian humility, if you will, and I like that there are attempts to be creative within that framework, and I think it sometimes pays off very well. And it's not. It has more to do with the rest of the Dutch scene than you might think. I think so. That's that. I don't have great complex thoughts on this. Those are my thoughts.
That's fair enough. Well, it's not an extremely complex album. It is a rigorous study of a certain kind of black metal that was probably around the time that Duister stopped making music in 2005 was one of the biggest things, but now it's kind of a footnote of the black metal scene. There's not a lot of people doing just like kind of Transylvanian hunger style albums anymore. I think that was what attracted me to this, was that is a deeply uncool thing to do nowadays. And this guy's like, yeah, fuck it, let's just do it. So just to get started and to confirm everyone's suspicions of what this sounds like, let's go with my first sample. This is off a track called In Vas van Duister Ginsel. And this is a perfect sort of weird third-generation Xerox of Transylvanian hunger. So let's try it out. So yeah, that is Transylvanian hunger, man. That is big melodic riff, nasty chromatic riff, same big melodic riff. Most of these songs are like 2 or 3 riffs.
Yeah, not crazy about the riffs on this one either.
Really? I love that main riff, that main melodic one. The rigor is what appeals to me.
I do like that it's in that rigor. It's in this rigorous songwriting format. A lot of the other Dutch bands have that. Another, I guess, just a comment for listeners who are new to the show or whatever. I like the Dutch scene a lot, especially around the Hayden's Heart label or Meslam Teo or Askra, who we've covered on the show. But something those bands sort of pride themselves on being influenced by the second wave, but not really sounding like Darkthrone or Burzum. Mm-hmm. So maybe this sets itself apart a little bit by sounding like Darkthrone, but that kind of sprawling lead riff that you like definitely has something in common with the broader scene. You say in the notes that gray quality, which I think is right.
Yeah, this is a very gray record in general.
Mm-hmm. I can also hear, like, there's a depressive quality to it, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think Transylvanian Hunger was really informative to DSBM in general. And I think that's something that people acknowledged more back in the day, and now it's kind of forgotten.
I think that's right.
Now that DSBM is this weird, like, footnote scene.
Oh, because back in the day, there were, half the Burzthron bands were DSBM. I mean, like Vigrid, right? Basically sounds almost exactly like Burzum, but was a DSBM band.
Oh, yeah. And Vigrid rules.
Yeah.
No, I think one thing that's... a lot of what I like about this record is how it channels a lot of the thoughts about Transylvanian Hunger or albums like it that were kind of standard talking points about them back in the day that are forgotten now. Like, a big thing this album does, which Transylvanian Hunger did, and everyone acknowledged it for this, was the very hypnotic quality of it. It is absolutely designed to just kind of wash over you. It's not... It is background listening, but that's the intent of it. It's, and that's a thing that people used to understand about Transylvanian Hunger is this is extremely atmospheric mood music where you just, you chill out, man. You listen to it, you enjoy yourself. And I think this takes it to the furthest possible degree where it is just hypnotic kind of ambient music.
Yeah, I can hear that. It's certainly very ambient. I was trying to make sense of the mood here. You were noting just how evangelical the lyrics are. Right?
Yeah, it's very weird. Like,
the black metal element is just the gloominess of it, I guess. Only the Lord can save him now. Life is leaving his body. The cold hands folded. He says softly his last prayer. Please hear his bitter words, begging to you. Please hear his prayer, my Lord. He awaits his answer with faith.
It's clearly... I think Visions of God is like evangelical Protestant in general.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, this is evangelical, yeah.
Which is very interesting, especially as, a Catholic,
I'm not a big... I can't say I like this approach to unblack metal. Really is a Protestant thing. You're like Reverum and Malak is not an unblack metal band; it's a black metal band. But like I was trying to make sense. Like I was gonna try to make sense of this. What it's like that's cool. It's kind of like Caspar David Friedrich. You know him, right? The landscape painter ripped off at all these metal album covers.
Oh, vaguely, but I'm not super familiar.
Well, if you look him up, you'll instantly be like, oh, it's that guy. Sort of like two tiny figures contemplating a remote sunset, lone cowled monk on a gray beach that's almost the same color as the endless blue sea.
That sounds pretty tight. I mean,
chapel in the... ruined chapel in the dead trees with a line of acolytes marching to it. Kind of, I think that's on the cover of Osculum and Fam.
Okay.
But his album art has this very black metal sensitivity to nature.
His album art. You mean his paintings?
Yeah, well, there you go. So his paintings. His paintings are extremely black metal, have this sensitivity to this sort of inhuman scale of nature, but they're very melancholy in a way that you could relate to the Christian attitude, and he himself was very Protestant. I don't know if he was an evangelical. He was probably like I can't remember. Was he a Calvinist? Let's see. Let's find out. German Romantic landscape painter. Let's say strict Lutheran creed. Okay, so kind of more mainline Protestant, but definitely a Protestant. And definitely this kind of idea that, oh, well, the Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog is him. There we go. So that classic thing that's on the cover of Nietzsche books, it's on the cover of just, every teenage black metal guy has used this as his MySpace picture.
Yeah.
Back in the day. This idea that like the sort of inhospitable grayness and bleakness of nature produces this vulnerability that makes you turn to the divine for salvation, right?
Yeah.
Nature's the devil's church and all that. But let's try my sample. This is a little more in the punky line, and I think I like these parts better.
Okay.
This is from Bedreven in Quad.
All right, let's try it out.
Mm-hmm. So I thought that's just good, solid, straight up minimalist riff writing. So you got that first riff, which is sort of the more power chordy kind of propulsive riff, right? It is this nice kind of two-part sort of sequence, this kind of basic rhythmic motif. And then when it lets loose into that more atmospheric melody in the middle, that part changes the rhythm, but it kind of keeps the basic idea. It's like it sort of smooths out the sharp angles in it, and it moves the playing to a more melodic register, but some of the momentum is preserved in this more sort of flowing, beautiful variation. And then it tightens back up into that first riff at the end. And I think having the, I wouldn't say that the kind of chorus riff is like amazing, but I think because it has that, it kind of keeps the weight of that first more aggressive riff behind it.
Yeah, I get that.
And so the context makes the beginning of that riff hit way harder, work really well as a release. And then it's got a nicely chosen notes in that kind of like 3 or 4 note turnaround at the end that I think carry it.
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, at this point, the art of the 3-riff black metal song is sort of a forgotten thing. Like, how do you make a song like this that's so indebted to both... It's really indebted to Discharge and Celtic Frost, as well as, at least for the time, much more modern ideas in second wave black metal, which is one of the things that made Transylvanian Hunger such an important album. Now it's, Transylvanian Hunger is almost like dismissed these days, because we've all heard it so much. But
yeah, it's hard to hear fresh.
Exactly. Yeah, it's sort of like when we did that bonus episode with you listening to Onward to Golgotha. And it's like, well, shit, so I'm listening to the original version of all these ideas I've been hearing for the past 15 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting part of this, is this has a much more rooted sort of context to the original idea, which was this hyper-rigorous concept of a deliberate limitation. Like, these are not organically written songs. They are songs written within a very deliberate framework where it's like, I literally have access to 3 riffs. And those 3 riffs, each riff individually cannot have more than this number of notes or chords in it. How do I create something compelling with it? And a lot of it does have to do with internal momentum and these kind of, like, really deep subtleties to the way they work together.
Yeah, I think my next sample kind of zeroes in on that, too. But do you want to do yours? Oh, you've got a whole song. So actually, let me do my next sample. I think this fits in with what you were saying just now.
Do I have a full song?
No, you just have like an over 2-minute sample.
Oh yeah,
Sorry,
I've got like half a
one.
song. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is basically exactly. Oh, you know what? Fuck it. I read my notes in the wrong order. But basically that works. Or I kept looking at the notes for the part I thought I put in it, and then it's down here. But like basically that's the point. It's basically exactly the same idea. You have a tighter, more compressive, kind of punky riff. You have the release riff. You go back to the first one. Here's that done. I think that's done pretty well on my first sample. Mm-hmm. I'm not crazy about that melodic idea. And what I said about the momentum that the chorus riff keeps is what makes it good, I think. Here, I like both of these riffs a lot, and I think the formula is really firing on all cylinders here. So this is from, and here's, you can see, in this comparison, you can see that framework you were talking about.
Okay.
That, like, deliberate writing within restrictions. So this is from Chowantan, Vend, and Dweevil. This is about 20 seconds in.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, so I really like that chorus riff. That's pretty majestic sounding. And it's got this kind of legato gliding feeling to it, in contrast with the verse riff.
Yeah, there's a lot of... It's interesting how much, when you're making black metal this minimal, how much the playing style really influences the ultimate result of this music. Mm-hmm. Just because, when you've got such kind of minimal music, it really puts every action under a microscope in a way. And that's something this album does well, is the sort of, like, very smooth sort of guitar playing across this record. You've got the ragged guitar tone, but clearly the left-hand work is just these sort of, like, smooth, organic slides all the time.
Yeah, and that creates a kind of heaviness in that spot. That's the smoothness really comes to the fore, and I guess that's how it is on Transylvanian Hunger too, right? There's certain parts that, because they glide, sound have even more weight.
Oh yeah, I mean it's like hardcore. It's like it's got that sense of terrible momentum to it that makes it so strong. That makes it sound faster and more intense than it maybe necessarily is. It's these little fluctuations in the way you play these instruments.
And he bothers writing rhythm guitar lines too, so that helps there.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, one thing you brought up in the notes that is very important is his drumming style.
Yeah.
Which is very indebted to Fenriz. Like, it involves real study of Fenriz's drumming.
Yeah, so like he's got, anytime he nears the end of a phrase, right, you get that kind of clattering sound. And it relates to the gliding riffing idea, the smooth riffing, because it's kind of like the drums signal a slowdown, the blast beat momentum breaks, you get this sound, but the momentum is the basic rhythmic impulse is never broken, the basic 16th note feel, and it's kind of like gathering momentum as it slows. It's like speeding up as for the next riff at the same time as it slows down, which I think is pretty cool.
Well, it's kind of, I get the sense that, like on Transylvanian Hunger, you're not meant to think of these riffs as distinct parts. It is all designed to be a single monotonous block, and monotonous is not necessarily a negative thing for this music. This is monotonous music. It is supposed to be just this steady ostinato rhythm with these sort of like simple chord gestures arcing over it. It's one of the earliest instances of black metal as ambient music, in a way. Like Transylvanian Hunger or this album, you could basically just like play it on synth and release it as an ambient tape, and it would have sort of the same effect. In a lot of ways, I think. Yeah. You could do the Transylvanian Hunger riff on a dungeon synth tape and nobody would notice.
People are like, this tape's fucking awesome.
Oh, man. Just do a full cover with different song titles and shit.
It's like the best dungeon synth record I've ever heard. It literally is Transylvanian Hunger the entire way through.
I think it would be pretty sick.
Yeah.
But, alright, so let me get to the last sample we got here. And I think this is the best song on the album. And obviously a best song on an album like this is a matter of molecules different, because these are all kind of the same song in a sense. But damn if the title track to this record isn't outstanding. And so this is Over Zwarte Kunsten, Hexerich, and Andere Dienaren van het Quad. So let's listen to this a little bit and see what you think of it.
All right.
Stop!
think that is the best track.
Yeah, that is kind of head and shoulders above the rest of it. It's like, damn, that is the kind of, if you're gonna make this style of black metal, it's kind of a perfect song. It's I mean, part of it is to do with the slightly added complexity. There's a fourth riff.
A third. I like that hardcore, that kind of like hardcore-y, not exactly breakdown, but it broke it up.
I really like the that simple like octave plunge of the bass on that second lead riff. It's like it's these little things that make such a difference when you're making music like this.
Yeah, that kind of just the way the main melody lifts from the first to the second repeat.
Yeah, it's simple stuff, but that's what makes it so challenging to write. You know, you've got very limited options available, and you got to make something out of it. You know. So I think, honestly, it's like I will say I've just got a lot of affection for this record, just because. Well, shit, man, it's been 12 years since I heard something like this. All this stuff. As soon as 2010 ticked over, this style was dead. Nobody is making stuff like this.
I think that
anymore.
kind of is true, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's funny because that's what we grew up on it and what we hated, so much. But now it's almost like a nostalgia trip. It's like, oh, fuck, there's still guys making records like this,
Yeah, it's I was never that fond of that style back in the day, so I don't know that I have as much affection for it as you do, but I think this is pretty well done. I think it's good. I think, if he puts out something else, I'd be happy to review it on the show.
It's a good execution of its conceit.
And it's yes, it is. And it's certainly worth talking about, because some of our Zoomers probably are kind of unfamiliar with this style.
They didn't grow up in an era where you buy a black metal lot of 20 CDs on eBay and half of them sounded like this. Except they usually sounded worse than this.
Oh, yeah. No, they usually sounded like, by like 2008, they weren't, people have gone back to the tape thing, for better and worse. But in 2008, they weren't recorded on 8 tracks. They were recorded on GarageBand, and they sounded like shit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was like... anyone listening out there, if you remember a band like Gansmord, just comment for us. So, all right, so fun record, and we'll be back with our final one of the night.
Hi, this is Taylor from Crushing the Scepter, and you're listening to Terminus Podcast.
All right, and we are back with Gjendod's Angrep, who apparently this is a band that you recommended to me before, but like I was saying before we got on the show, everything you recommend to me is some like weird European name that I can never remember. So, but you've got more experience with these guys, right?
Yeah. So they're on the very short list of Norwegian black metal bands that are good. So in recent
nowadays,
history,
nowadays Norwegian black metal.
We talked about Panzer Wars, at least. I mean, he's in Canada now, but he's a guy from Norway. Gjendod also sounds very second wave, but not like any of the second wave bands, and seems to be paying careful attention to the way that the music has developed outside the Norwegian sound.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not so much that they incorporate other styles as they find ways to approximate things. Like so on their last record, Krigsduger, which I think does mean something like Dogs of War, they were kind of it's like a Norse take on the solar black metal thing. There are real just big hits on that album, very sort of like bright, bursting with energy, and on the record before that, I'm trying to find what it is, because it'd be nice. Okay, here we go. Nedstigning. Who knows how you pronounce that exactly? Oh, that's kind of like Nidstag, I think, but Nedstigning. Yeah. This is their first. I think it was their first full length. So this comes before Kriegsdugger. This was like DSBM influenced, but didn't sound like DSBM. And I thought it might be good to sample a bit off this so that you can understand where these guys are coming from. I also think you'll appreciate this part.
Okay.
So what do you think?
Well, that's fucking awesome. It's also, comparing it to this record, this record has moments like that, but this record is interesting because it's divided kind of harshly in half between kind of epic, melodic, very like take moments like that, and these brutal, like, deliberately excruciating kind of chromatic ideas.
Oh yeah, the brutality is new. I think this is one of those kind of distinct personality to every record bands.
Oh, okay.
And so or it seems to be that way. So
the older stuff is more kind of melodic in general.
Well, yeah, this is one of the most lush tracks on this record, but it's got those vocals, right? Aren't those insane?
I love the vocals. For this band, just grumbling goblin stuff.
Oh, I would walk around in the winter, and I will again this winter, listening to this and going, oh.
It's just so it's got a definite kind of like punky, not giving a fuck quality. You know, even at its most kind of elaborate and melodic, this music seems to just like hate you. You know,
there's this sort of big lift in the music, like a weight being lifted off your shoulders, and he just goes, oh. But but most of that record has these kind of more sort of, you can hear that kind of classic second wave, maybe emperor-y kind of Grieg melody in the guitar. And the first record Nedstigning has a lot of that, and a lot of kind of abrasive, dissonant use of Norse guitar to create DSBM ideas.
Yeah.
Sort of like more spidery and fragmented with a lot of really disgusting vocals. Kriegsdugger has more of the melodic stuff like you just heard, like the big epic parts, and it's kind of their more sort of martial heroic record, has a really just brilliant song on there that maybe we'll play at the end of the show. And then Angrep, yeah, this is the first time they've gone for like super storming aggro Norsk fart metal.
Are you proud of me, Dad? I got a dissonant record on the show.
Yeah, I'm very proud of you, son. And this is, I think you like this because this kind of takes the things that you don't like that much about the Norse second wave and cranks them up to such an extreme that you have to respect
Exactly. It's, goddamn, this is such... This is such a fucking unfriendly album, which is funny because it has... I chose this album off listening to a couple advanced tracks, which are mostly in the very dissonant vein, and I was just so impressed by the sheer, like, vicious rigor of, like, let's take the weirdest parts of the second wave and create these, like, complex geometric kind of songs around them, and there's just no fun allowed. Fuck you. You know,
no fun allowed.
Absolutely no fun allowed on a lot of this record. About half of it. And it was only when I listened to the full thing, I was like, oh wow, and there's also like giant fucking take riffs in this?
That's kind of their thing. Is they realized what was always distinctive about the Norse sound is this extreme abrasion and grimness coupled with these like uplifting payoff moments.
Yeah,
and they've always done that in one way or another on each record, but they do it in a different way each time.
Well, here it's very different because those songs, it's like those songs are separate. You have half brutally dissonant, cruel songs and half very melodic, kind of overflowing tracks, I feel.
All right, well, let's hear one. Hit us with the hammer.
Yeah, well, here's one. I bumped this one up front just because it's so vicious and it's perfect. We're just going to listen to all of the final track on this record. This is a song called Sveket.
I think that's Norse for fuck it.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, right?
So
okay.
Let's just listen to this whole thing.
Damn, death metal guy, that was some extreme metal.
It's like the whole band is just screaming "fuck you" the whole time. It's just like fuck, man. It grinds so much harder than almost anything.
That
like
grinds really hard.
And we were talking while I was playing it. It was like, I think I realized why I like this stuff, because obviously people listening to the show know that my taste in black metal is consonant, sugary, big melodies. So it's kind of weird that I would bring an album like this, but you know what it is? It's a black metal that is, in a sense, very like a lot of the brutal death stuff that I like.
I get that, especially on this song.
The sheer fucking abrasion of this music and the viciousness of it is... Man, I haven't felt this way listening to a black metal record in God knows how many years, you know?
The rhythmic, those rhythms there, like, I've heard, we've both heard bands that have used kind of sliding dissonant chords like that, but that rhythmic choppiness, which isn't exactly technical, it's just really creative. Honestly,
I will say, as a guy that plays guitar a lot of this record is very hard to play.
Okay, I believe that.
It's.
I guess what I mean is it doesn't really sound like one of those late '90s prog black bands.
Oh yeah, it's not flashy, but
it's not like Dodheimsgard or something,
But dude, some of the riffs on this, it's just the slides are so massive, popping not between an octave, but between like 2 octaves. Like it's very challenging stuff across this record.
It's also, it would be, I was not trying to disparage that. I just meant it was so much a black metal riff, not a tech black metal
riff. It is.
And it was just an extremely savagely it was savagely rhythmic in a way that a lot of BM isn't, especially nowadays when people tend to emphasize these flowing melodies that sometimes are in these kind of preset patterns.
Yeah, and I'm interested in what you would compare it to, because a big thing that struck me on this record was like Chimera era mayhem. Another like forgotten mayhem record that is an outstanding record. I would compare a lot of the melodic ideas and rhythmic ideas on this record to that.
I remember Chimera feeling a lot more death metal than this, and a lot more kind of mechanical. Yeah. This doesn't feel mechanized at all. That's the other thing I was trying to get at. Like, it's just black metal, but I get the mayhem thing. I get it could be like Grand Declaration of War too, right?
Yeah, but Grand Declaration has this like coldness. Mm-hmm. There's like this weird manic warmth to this record that I think is one of the things that makes it interesting. You said while we were talking, as it was playing, it was like, oh, it's black metal that converges, which is very correct. But it doesn't sound like any black metal band that incorporates converge.
No, there's no quote unquote mathcore in this. But
the mood is very similar. Just that the sheer kind of ferocious manic energy of it.
Yeah, that counting that riff would be really hard. And you know what it is? It's like realizing you have a certain kind of compositional freedom that nobody else is using. This band, and they've done that throughout their career, I think, Gjendod. They've sort of been like, where can Norse black metal go? Well, they look around and they see these wide open paths that nobody else is walking down. And they're like, why not go over here? And this is not only unique to Norse black metal, it's pretty unique to just modern black metal in general, to take like a elemental riff-oriented approach to the style that emphasizes aggression and to make it so rhythmically free. It's weird to say this. This might be the most aggressive record I've heard this year. Could be.
This is so goddamn extreme.
In terms of stuff from my neck of the woods that sounds a lot like your neck of the woods, like Brutal Death, this is a lot like Concrete Winds, which was probably the most aggressive record of last year for me.
Yeah, it's God, I think that's the biggest thing that I appreciate is just the... I haven't, black metal at a certain point, especially nowadays, is very infatuated with flowing epic melody and kind of advancing that that feature of the genre, which is fine, and I love a ton of that. But there was a lot of stuff I listened to growing up and getting into this music that was like very attacking. And I think that might have been lost from a lot of this music.
That's what I'm kind of saying, man. That's what I've been saying. And like you go to maybe you go to brutal death for attack music, and I tend to go to black metal for that. But like, or like, for strange arty dissonance, you'll tend to go to Morbid Angel, right? Yeah. Whereas I'll go like Soren, who I think are very Morbid Angel influenced. But like, this is, but yeah, I think one reason you've kind of lost interest in the more aggressive side of BM is because there hasn't been that much invention in it in a long time. And this is This is inventing new shit, man. My God, it's always so refreshing when the Norwegians, hit one out of the park.
It's like, we're still here, guys. We can still do it.
And this is more than there've been plenty of Still Here albums out of Norway intermittently over the last 10 years, but this is like, hey, this is where things are happening. So let's try for one of my reference points for what this sounds like, I think you could, so if you go to Chimera, the sort of avant fringe of the Norse sound, you could also go back to some of its earliest grinding roots. And let's go to this first couple minutes of Angrep, and then I'll play you a sample comparison.
All right, let's try it. So I'm actually curious on your perspective here, because this is one of the only bands I've heard that can pull off that totally, like, neck-snapping shift from brutal chromaticism to overwhelming melody. As we heard on the sample right here. What are these guys doing differently? Because I don't even know if I could tell you what it is that makes that work for me here where it doesn't work on other bands.
Interesting. Well, part of it is simply that you don't like it when some other bands do it, but also part of it is just that there aren't many bands doing it now. And the melodic and dissonant, like Panzer War is just all the most dissonant parts of Norse black metal, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty much, with a few little folky riffs thrown in. But, I think it's like, it's the thing Emperor had. It's like being good. Like, there are, like, as in being good at music to a degree that I can't describe. There's a kind of there's like technical skill and an ear for how key changes work that like somebody like me, I can write pretty good black metal riffs. At least my friends say so, right? But I play pretty firmly in the vein of sort of, punkish, reptile-brained, heathen, shaman black metal, right? And, keep it on one note, please. And you're a much better guitarist than me, but like, these guys just have an ear for key changes, which is a lost art, which Emperor was really good at.
Yeah.
And they have a way of keeping the guitar technique seamless. There you go. I was going to say dense propulsive. They move with dense chords and propulsive rhythmic movements, and that doesn't change when they barrel over into that lovely melodic lift.
Yeah, and I think one thing I was going to say, I think part of it is like maintaining the energy. You know, because a lot of these guys they'll do the neck snapping change from chromatic to melodic, or vice versa, and it's like they'll shift the energy. With these guys, with Gjendod, it's like no, it's like it's operating at 280 beats per minute, and by God, we're gonna keep it going as we do this switch.
That's a very good point. That's like something like, Demisteris isn't as next. It's always kind of in between those two levels of melody and disharmony. But that's a good example. The energy is pretty consistent. What would be? Yeah, and often it's that, the more dissonant parts are kind of just punctuation marks in modern versions of this. So and often the way it works is you lead with the big melodies and you drop into the dissonant stuff, which is like Warmed Over Emperor and Dark Throne as a kind of breakdown effect, right?
It's a gesture towards traditional black metal.
But you don't really commit to the breakdowny idea of it in the way that, say, Emperor or Mayhem did. So you get you could do the Satanic War Master song where it's like, now we're on the stompy dissonant riff. But, when you're listening to Satanic War Master, and I think a lot of people are like, okay, get back to the part that's like, yeah, Satanic War Master.
Exactly, yeah.
Whereas this music's kind of driven by this is also a thing about it. It's like, this band uses melodic parts as payoffs. And they're payoffs that don't necessarily happen in conventional verse-chorus places where you'd expect them, like in a Finnish song. So if you take a Hexen song or whatever from the early stuff, it'll bash you over the head a good amount and then delivers a sort of beautiful riff as a chorus. Sometimes they work like choruses in this band. Sometimes they don't at all, right? Like that riff we just had just hits unexpectedly.
Yeah, it's out of nowhere, and it's actually cool.
Or like in the sample I played at the beginning, right? It's kind of, the atmosphere is totally miserable, but here you go. Here's this kind of gorgeous riff. It doesn't really stop being miserable. So here's a comparison for this. So before I go to this comparison, another thing we noticed here is that second riff, that super ripping one. As we were listening to it, I was like, that's like a death metal folk riff. Just low-end trem, savage dissonance with a folkish rhythmic inflection to it. That's like the ideas in some early Scandinavian stuff, maybe like Treldum or something. But I've never heard the folky part of early Norse black metal combined with the sort of dissonant melody part, and that really did it. Anyway. So another thing that this seems to be drawing on is demo era enslaved. And what connects it as a kind of chording, I would say the default blast chording on this is kind of an apocalyptic trumpet feel. Okay. So let's go to the beginning of Enslaved's Heimdall, and you'll hear what I mean.
All right, let's go.
Yeah.
So you kind of hear what I mean?
Yeah, I get it. It's, I mean, part of it is just channeling kind of primordial ideas of black metal, you know, but before it was fully defined, and you could have these melodies or these kind of musical ideas that were quote-unquote death metal, and no one would look at it as, well, it's, I mean, obviously, like, the opening riff there is kind of like a death metal riff in a way, but you wouldn't call that a Black Death demo.
No.
In any sense. It's a black metal demo.
And, you know, and the way they modulate it up is kind of black metal, I think. It's
Yeah.
And the way it's... And, you know, that sort of riff later becomes, like, sort of segregated off into its own subgenre, right? That just becomes, like, Marduk music, right? But
proto-war metal, in a way.
Exactly, yeah. But here, it's just an organic part of the style. It has that savage grinding quality we've talked about. We just recorded a bonus episode on Emperor, and among other things, and we talked about that remnant grind influence. But, like, I think there's something in the chord shape there. Like, it's more lush in Gjendod, but, like, I think they're using, like... I don't know. Are they using... You know more about guitar. Are they using, like, inverted power chords or, like octaves and shit? There's this kind of more droning quality to it, and it's like there's this secondary harmonic effect that makes it sound like trumpets. That's all I know.
I think that what's happening for a lot of Gjendod stuff is they're... Instead of using the standard, like, inverted power chord, inverted fifth style, they're doing... You know, the modifier where it's like 5 on the E, 6 on the A kind of thing. You know, that half step difference. Which creates this much more intensely dissonant effect, but you can create basically melodic riffs just by moving that around.
Oh, yeah. I know him. Yeah. Okay, so...
You know him?
Yeah, I know him. That chord.
Yeah, but I think that what these guys are doing is they're playing in standard, but their like home base on guitar is not the inverted fifth. It's like a bar chord, like a really harsh bar chord, or it's one of those modified chords. I don't think they're doing a lot of like standard power chord stuff on this record.
Right. So I think although it was harder to hear, I'm pretty sure that's what was going on with Slave too. In that sample. It just has this quality that's different from their other blasting parts.
Yeah, no, that was really cool. It's weird because I actually haven't listened to a lot of like old Enslaved. I listened to mostly their stuff around like 2000.
Yeah.
Sort of like when they were bridging the gap between older black metal and the kind of like prog style that we get into. And that got me intrigued because that was like way more extreme than I was expecting from them.
Oh yeah. No, I think it calms down pretty quick, but this and the tracks on Horda Insland are fantastic. Even, you know, I remember listening to Viking Lear Velde back in the day and just being kind of disappointed. Because it just wasn't that crazy.
Well, Enslaved was always a little bit more chilled out than their contemporaries. You know?
Yeah, but exactly, but not these. And the raw version of Allfather Odin, well, this is the raw version. Hordane's Land also has a version of it that's pretty damn raw, but that song is unhinged. So yeah.
Okay, had to crack another beer for this part. Okay, so next up, my second sample. you were demanding that I say the my notes for the section. Yeah, which I admittedly did say is like I like that a lot. So this is in a sense kind of compressing the breadth and scope of Take into this like tight fucking like claustrophobic lump of coal, and it's like providing it's, you know, Take is in a sense sort of like early solar metal, I would say. I think that Take
like
has
a Norse version of that.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with what the Italians and stuff would later do,
and the French.
And the French, yeah. But here's the alternative. You've got your glorious memories of Bergen, as like, Viking folk shit. Here's the reality. It's cold, it's dark, my feet hurt, there's a wolf on the album cover, this fucking sucks, I wish I could just play Xbox, but it's 1894, and we don't even have electricity, I fucking hate it. So, let's listen to a passage off Fra and Annen Seed.
Alright.
And goddamn if this isn't probably the best track on the album. Okay, so that is one of the best parts of a song. Well, this is one of the songs of the year. This one right here. This is like because I talked about that like when we talked about Oldowan Gash with Blinding Moon. That's one of the songs of the year. This is up there also. Holy shit! Like
dude, that
manic...
that was pretty solar too, or at least pretty fucking epic.
Yeah, it's definitely it's epic, but it not like Take. Take is like the expanse of the Misty Mountains. This is the epic fable of you encountering the wolf on your walk home. Yeah. Like the cover, The Ash Lad and the Wolf, by the artist. Theodore Severin Kittleson. This is a 1900 painting. And he's also the guy who did... he didn't do the cover for... They stole the cover for... Burzum's Philosophen.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
As well as, like, a bunch of other stuff. He did, like... I know that some of his stuff was stolen for, like, Front Beast... and some other kind of underground black metal stuff. Just like, he was really into drawing, like, trolls and kind of, like, late Norse folklore stuff. Kind of like
19th century folklore.
Yeah, very like fairy tale
stuff.
This
is all over. Yeah, they use his stuff on the Burzum bootleg, or not bootleg, the Burzum comp of the Dungeons and stuff that just got put out.
Yeah.
Let's say Monastery uses one of these on the cover of Peculiar Storms. I think that's the record of it. This is just all over metal.
But I like, but this fucking song in particular is like, Jesus Christ, the sheer manic energy of it is just like, it's like I say, it's like Take compressed into this just like brutally intense experience. It's like in that moment on this song, it's like I see him, you got the cover where he's encountering the wolf, and then I imagine him like wrestling with the wolf and stabbing it in the neck with his pocket knife.
Or like whopping it over the head again and again. Yeah, the wolf rushes him and he steps aside and he whops it on the head with his tiny walking stick, and he has to do that like 20 times until
to kill it
until the wolf's health bar is down. It's
which is a really different feeling for most black metal. That's one of the things I love about this record is there's a personal quality to it. You know what I mean?
This feels personal?
Yes, this to me feels like I am that like 13-year-old boy in the woods, and I am encountering a wolf, and Dad never told me what to do here. So I just have to rely on folklore and what I think is right in this moment. And sometimes that takes the form of this like super dissonant, scratchy panic, and sometimes it is the realization of the story. You know what I mean?
That's a lovely image. I mean,
sometimes it is. Sometimes everything goes as it is supposed to, and that is a moment like on this song. Like sometimes you achieve greatness. Well, because like I did some research for this because
nice.
the Ash Lad who is portrayed in this painting is a character from kind of like late Scandinavian folklore, and the idea is the Ash Lad is like kind of incompetent. You know, the Ash Lad is just like some fucking kid who doesn't really know what he's doing, but he usually finds his way to success through sheer like grit and understanding of what his father's taught him. And that's something I kind of get from this record. I think that's the energy this provides. It's like you don't fully understand it, but it's like you're gonna do your fucking best, and sometimes it goes bad in the dissonant parts, and sometimes it goes well in the melodic parts. Well,
it's got I like that it has I certainly get what you mean about the sense of desperation, of like desperate combat, of something being at stake. I mean, I think that's something you get in the best black metal, certainly not in a lot of it. I think I'll have to listen to this more and see what I think about the personal quality. I certainly hear the folkloric vibe. I get that. I get the sort of oh my god, I'm an ash lad, and here's a giant black wolf. And,
it's like, I'm just a dude. What the fuck am I supposed to do here?
And, that glorious sort of fiddle-sounding guitar, which I just love. It's like
it's
almost like if you zoom out on the life and death struggle, it becomes sort of not comic, but you just see the energy of it.
Well, it's not comic, but it is mythopoetic.
Yeah, it's a story that you can tell looking back on with a laugh.
Yeah.
I guess I see it more from the mythopoetic side. I think that the personal generally should stay out of black metal. So I'll have to think about whether this is a personal quality. I think there's an innovation happening in black metal now where some of it is starting to sound more personal. And that's not bad necessarily. It just means it's starting to sound less like black metal. Or
I think
I guess the atmosphere is... The sort of the ethos is shifting a bit, but
well, I think when you and I talk about the personal, we've got different ideas of what that means. Like for me, it's more like I can place myself into it and I can kind of empathize with it in a way. And I think when you think personal, you're getting into more concepts of the individual. No, I'm not saying that this is
centered
like...
on the experience of a person or sort of expressing emotions or things.
This is not something. This isn't something.
Oldalon Gash is more personal, right? And that's one thing that sets him apart. He wanted to sort of like write this. He just wanted to write black metal about how he felt, and he had some pretty black metal feelings. Or like Horn is very personal. Right.
Yeah, but I think that it's like it's personal, but it's not individual. You can insert yourself into it and identify with it, but it is not about you.
Okay, I get that. Yeah, I think... Yeah, well, I mean, either way, yeah. Also, this is just awesome. So I guess we better play another... So I get what you mean. Also, that was just a lovely vignette about this. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay.
Yeah. So, last sample from me. How do I top that, really? Here, let's just do another daring composition, a couple more daring compositional moves with massive epic riffs played at warp speed. All right.
Well, what song is this?
Sorry, Gap Up from
right.
just about a minute in.
Let's try it out.
So, stopping the song a minute and 30 seconds in to include a sort of ambient glockenspiel part is a daring move.
It's a bold move, Con. Let's see how it pays off.
And I think this time everything goes right too. I think this time the Ash Lad gets home safely. It's what's so cool is they bring that sort of bell sound back over the riff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like a random insertion. It's like the first version of the riff is just played on the bells. There's this just furious trading between the sort of the epic and the grim and the epic riffs, and it's just awesome. I mean, this record is a triumph, I think.
Yeah, which is amazing with how compressed it is. Did you realize?
It's triumph because it's so compressed, right?
I was about to say, did you realize this album is under a half hour long?
Kinda, yeah. Yeah.
You see, I didn't. This felt like a giant journey when I listened to it. It's like it felt huge. It felt
certainly
like
huge. I
had spent God knows how many years in this album.
Mm-hmm.
It's God, this is just one of the most kind of, like I was saying earlier, kind of like beautifully kind of mythopoetic black metal records I've heard in a long time. This is affecting on so many levels. It's smarter and better felt than almost anything that's come out this year.
I like that. Better felt. Yeah, it is felt very well. There's a sense of wonder here, which I think helps.
Yeah, there is a sort of... Even in its most extreme moments, there's a sense of almost like whimsy to it. even as, like, extreme and brutal as it is. There was something I said, like, in the notes, like, when I played that first track, Sveket. It's like, you're like the only adult at a birthday party for demon children. There's like an almost childlike wonder to this stuff, even as extreme and brutal as it gets. It never forgets this essence of something outside your perception. You know,
they're excited about the possibilities in the music, which is something that most people aren't anymore, and that kind of puts them above it. That is, it puts them above the music as a set of given structures or conventions. It's not like they don't seem like they're trying to live up to a genre type or to produce a certain kind of sound. It has this kind of that's part of the I think there's a playfulness to the way they're playing. They do things that seem cool and that sound good, and they're clearly been playing with each other forever.
I would say that's kind of the operative word, is the playfulness of this music.
Yeah, even when it's really stormy, there's kind of musical jokes built into it.
Yeah, there's
that part, the
glockenspiel.
Yeah, the glockenspiel, and then we're in the sort of we're in the mid-tempo part, but the drummer just keeps blasting. And I don't even know how they make it feel mid-tempo. I think he's just marking it with, cymbals and something in the guitars. But it's there's a sort of like, hey, look what we can do quality to it.
Yeah, it's fun. Even in its most extreme and dark moments, this is a very fun record, in a way. And fun can involve, risk and fear. Fun can involve darkness and trepidation. These are not necessarily, opposite emotions. I mean, look at Nordic folklore, which has a ton of kind of humor and celebration, even alongside some of its darkest moments. It's like, it makes intuitive sense as a record in a way that very few do now.
Yeah, it's the great works in any style are fun in addition to being profound, right?
Yeah.
And after that, you get bands that are profound, you get bands that are fun, not as much intersection. This is both. People could follow cues from this band, but, it'd be a challenge them to keep up.
Yeah. Definitely. This is not a band that is going to be influential, but people in the know will understand it as a perfect realization of a very precise sort of artistic intersection, in a way. It is in a sense, and I'll go on record as saying this.
I mean, dang,
this is a perfect sort of album for this very precise niche that they're involved in. This is kind of a perfect record.
Oh, it's definitely, yeah. I don't think you could find anything wrong with this. I'd like this to not be a niche. I'd like this band to not be an eccentric kind of a one-off act. It would be cool if people did listen to this and pay attention to it as more than like, oh, hey, cool, there's a band of Norwegians still doing it right. Which is, I think, how people have reacted to them so far. It is this kind of sui generis band. And I imagine there are some very modern black metal bands sort of copying them and copying the wrong things. Because there's kind of a modern production on this and all that. But, like, if you're starting a band or working on something, pay attention to this and don't imitate, like, the riff style or whatever. Don't do anything that vulgar, right?
Yeah.
they've already got a riff style, and their riff style is a version of well-established. It's the personal. This is one musician's variant on well-established Norse styles in terms of the melodies, usually. But like, listen to how they're doing it. Right? Listen to the intensity, and listen to the bizarre combination of freedom and rigor, right? And and you know, whenever they do something, whenever they throw you for a loop and it sounds like that's the way it had to be.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Everything feels very essential on this record.
Yeah, I think this is tighter than the things they've done in the past. For sure. This is definitely this is definitely superior to their previous works. And it's also, although it's certainly extremely aggressive and dark, it's, as I think you've covered this nicely, this is not, Krigstoger has parts of it that are glorious, but parts that are very depressive. This is, although it's violent, it's very affirmative music.
It definitely is.
Yeah. You got any last words? I mean, you really, yeah, you got...
Oh, I said all my words, man. Well,
all right.
Now you gotta decide what we do as an outro track.
Jeez. In honor of this band fucking kicking ass, why don't we play, the big single from Krigstoger?
Okay. Which one is that?
Narsarin Erensit or something. I'm not quite remembering the title. It's okay. Yeah, no, it's Narsarin Erensit. There we go. It's the third track. And you'll love it.
All right. So, listen to some more Gjendod on our way out.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for listening, guys.
Hail Gjendod.
Hail Gjendod. And we will talk to you next week. Take it easy.